Today we're going to discuss the question of whether it is possible for an Ashkenazi to convert to Sephardic or vice versa, and also if for example on Pesach an Ashkenazi visits a Sephardic household and they eat rice and kitniot and legumes, could he eat there? So the first question of whether you could convert your practice, your minhag, comes very often around Pesach, where a lot of Ashkenazim say, I wish I were Sephardic so I could eat rice and legumes and all that. But there are other situations where people want to do different minhagim that are not theirs. For example, instead of waiting 6 hours between dairy and meat, they say, I heard that some people say, I heard that the Ashkenazim wait only 4 hours or 3 hours, or the Yeke and Dutch custom is to wait 1 hour. So, could I do that? The second question that I'm going to discuss, whether Ashkenazi could eat at a Sephardic house, it has been discussed, but it was discussed in the sense of, could you eat the other dishes that don't have rice? And for that, there were discussions of it's okay if some flavor was absorbed in the dishes. I want to talk about whether someone who usually doesn't eat rice or legumes and is visiting a household where they do eat that, can he eat with them in order not to offend the host, like to go off his practice for one night or one time and do that. So first I start with the minhag. There's a lot of discussion of minhag, that the minhag is binding and you can never change it, but it seems like that the tendency in the past to oppose switching over from one practice to another had to do with the way people lived before World War I. Even with people, being very, the mobility of the Jewish people moving from place to place, but people tended to take with them their traditions and reestablish wherever they went the community of the old country, right? For example, those who were expelled from Spain, the Megorashim, wherever they went, they brought their minhagim with them. They came to Syria and they had a separate group until 200 or 300 years later they assimilated into the Syrian community. Same way in Morocco, a lot of Megorashim came to Morocco, to Algeria. In Tunisia, there was a group called the Gorni, which came from Leghorn or Livorno in Italy and kept their minhagim in Italy. But they had a certain kind of a common cause and history that kept them together. But starting from World War I, a little before that, there were so many cataclysmic events around the world where people moved from one place to another, whole nations, and then of course World War I, the Holocaust, and now the way we live as the Jewish people, we're very well aware. In the past, people were not as aware of the customs of other groups as they are today, because we live in an age of global communication, and people know each other through Facebook. They can learn of different minhagim. Communities are more in flux than they were before. So here we have an interesting ruling of a rabbi that usually is not considered very liberal or open-minded. Actually, the exact opposite. Rabbi Yitzhak Yaakov Weiss, who was the head of the Eda Haredit, the ultra-Orthodox community in Yerushalayim for many, many years. And he rules the following. This is what he says. Hineha pashut debevadai yahid או אפילו ציבור ספרדים שדעתם לקבוע דירתם או בית כנסת שלהם אצל קהל אשכנזי או בהיפוך. So he talks about a situation where an individual or even a community that has Sephardic traditions, but they now live within an Ashkenazi neighborhood, or they join an Ashkenazi neighborhood, or they are they're of the opinion of going there and living there permanently, or beipuch, or vice versa, Ashkenazim who moved into a Sephardic neighborhood, how they live with them. ואין דעתם לחזור לעולם למקומם ומנהגם הראשון. And they have no intention to go back to where they lived before. This is an important factor because in the past, the yardstick to determine whether you could change your minhag or not was, are you moving permanently or temporarily? So if, for example, you moved from a place where people eat kitzniyot on Pesach to a place where they don't eat, but you're going to go back, so maybe you cannot change it. So, but once it's clear that you're never going back, then you could adapt to the new minhag. But interestingly enough, he says not only that you're not going back to your place, they're not going to reclaim their old practice. You could go, you could follow the minhag of your new adopted community, even when it's for being more lenient. Not only, usually people say, okay, if you want to be more strict, it's good. Lenient, it's not so good. He says even to be more lenient, you can. So let's say an Ashkenazi decided to join the synagogue, and he says, from now on, I want to eat kitniyot on Pesach, according to Yaakov Weiss, no problem. If Sephardi wants to say, okay, I want to live with Ashkenazim and have the minhag of waiting 1 hour between dairy and meat, he says no problem. So the question will be, of course, what happens if you want to have sort of an amalgam, and have a mixture of minhagim. I will take some of this, some of that. Some people are against it because they say it's pick and choose. But at the end of the day, all of the halachot that the rabbis rule, everything that comes after the time of the Talmud is a pick and choose. The rabbis pick in a certain place to follow this, in another place to follow that, but all opinions are valid. Otherwise, you would make some Jews within the confinements of halakha, they will be sinners. So all opinions are valid. The fear of the halakhic authorities of this situation is that people are going to lose some kind of their definition, or it will be chaos. But I think that we should give people credit. They know how to manage it. As long as in the public realm, you keep one minhag. Let's say in the synagogue, we follow our tradition. We don't switch over every day. That's good. In the private individual realm, people should have more flexibility. Now the question is this: that stems from that. If Ashkenazi technically could switch his minhag over permanently, could he do it when just occasionally he visits someone who eats kitniyot on Pesach? So it includes legumes and rice. So I think that, and that was I wrote, that the question goes beyond legumes and beyond Ashkenazim to all situations of where you are invited to a place or you're inviting people over. But now we talk about people who consider themselves observant and kosher. Not going to go into situations where people are not, they say officially I'm not kosher or something like that. People who are observant and kosher invite friends, and you have all kind of awkward situations. I don't know if you ever had that. People going into the kitchen and checking, they open, can I get some water? And they go and they're not looking for water. They're going to look at the labels of the food in your fridge, right? And they say, where's your garbage can? They want to throw something in the garbage, but now they really want to look at what, where did you take this bread from, or the cookies, or they look at the packages, or they have no problem with asking you up front, where did you buy the meat? How did you make this dish? How do you check the vegetables? So, is it allowed to do that? I mean, what do you do in this situation? Do you eat and say, okay, if there was a problem, it's on their shoulders, right? Or you don't eat and you say, it's better for me not to, Haz v'shalom, commit such a sin of digesting something which is not kosher, right? So, I think there's a very simple rule, and that is that, and we're talking about some people who consider themselves kosher, right? So maybe they made a certain mistake, or they don't live exactly up to your standards. But whatever they did, they're definitely not serving you something which is forbidden by biblical law, like pork or meat and dairy cooked together. But even if they did, and you trusted them, they told you it's kosher, and you trusted them, and you ate there. So, and let's say something was not kosher, and you have digested it unintentionally. It's called beshogeg. Now, come Yom Kippur, you're going to repent with all the the long list of sins that we mentioned. We say maybe we ate something that was not kosher. God will forgive you. God has the ability to forgive you for something that you did that goes against His rules, if you did unintentionally. Now, on the other hand, if you have offended your host by not eating their food, his or her food, God cannot forgive you. No matter what you say, and you come to God and say on Kippur, I'm sorry that I've offended my host, right? My friend, and says, I can't help you. I'm very sorry. You have to go back to them and ask for their forgiveness, because it's not in my hands. You have offended another person. Interestingly enough, Maimonides, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon speaks about in Ilchot Teshuvah. He speaks about certain things. There's a list of 24 things that prevent people from doing Teshuvah, and one of them is a category of five concepts that will prevent people from doing Teshuvah because they don't even consider it a sin, so they would never do Teshuvah for. So in this situation, like I said, I've seen that happening, where people refuse to eat by friends right, and they go about their business and they never realize that they have offended someone. They will never go back to that person and say, last Shabbat I was at your house and I didn't want to eat the hot food because I didn't know how you warmed it, and I'm really sorry for that. And the other person would say, you know what, you really offended me, I was hurt, but I forgive you. Then you're good, then you're clear with God. If you didn't do that, you have a problem. So it happened to me once, I know from experience, when I was in yeshiva, I went to visit my aunt. My aunt was a very righteous woman. Her father, she's my great aunt. Her father was a Hacham Yehuda, great Kabbalist, Tabit Hacham. And we were very close. She raised me, like a second mother. And then when I came to yeshiva, I became a little more strict. I visited her for Shabbat just before Minhag. She made me a cup of tea, and then I looked at the watch and I said, "Wow, I'm late for Minhag, and I have to go." And I ran for the Bet Knesset. Maybe a week or 2 weeks later, when we were talking, I found out that she was deeply hurt because she thought that I didn't drink the tea because I didn't rely on the way she prepared the tea on Shabbat. Because some people really, this is a big problem for them. How do you make the tea? Do you put the tea bag first? Do you put the water first? Do you pour it to another cup? Like crazy things, unbelievable. And I spoke once to someone who spent 5 years in yeshiva, and I said at the time, I was 10 years in yeshiva. I said, "How do you make a cup of tea on Shabbat?" He says, "I don't know. I don't drink tea. I'd rather not drink tea on Shabbat. I avoid it." He says, "With all the learning, you don't know how to make it." Whatever. But now my aunt was offended that I didn't drink the tea. And I said, no, I promise, I was late for Minhag. I'm so sorry that so I made a point to come the following Shabbat and so wait for the tea. I said, to make it the way we make it, and to drink it, that she sees that I drink it, and I said the baracha. So here, this is a big issue. That is something, if people knew that they have committed a sin for which they cannot repent, would they ask their hosts, is the food kosher or not? If you want not to eat there, find reasons not to eat, it's okay. If you want to say that that you're a vegetarian or a vegan and only stick to certain foods, but be consistent with that, fine. But one cannot cast doubt on the kashrut of others. So here is an interesting teshuvah by Rabbi Yosef Meshash from Meknes. He speaks about the Bet Yosef, glat meat, kosher meat, all the different levels of kashrut. So when he came to Israel, and he was the chief rabbi of Haifa, there were people who complained against the chief rabbinate of Haifa, saying, why are you giving hechsher, the kosher stamp, for meat, which is not according to Moroccan or Sephardic standards? And it came to the level of accusation that one man wrote a letter to the Ashkenazi rabbi saying, you're feeding us non-kosher food. Rabbi Yosef Meshash was very upset with that man. He says, you cannot call it non-kosher if it's kosher according to a different custom. There were different levels. You chose to be more strict, but you have to accept the others. But then he says the following, and this is called Ma'aseh Rav, meaning when you say the halakha and it's written, like what Rabbi Meshash says, oh, okay, you say it for the public, but you wouldn't do it yourself, right? Rabbi Meshash says the following, Kach haya minhag bechol Morocco. He says this was our custom when we lived in Morocco, and he refers to all Moroccan rabbis. שהיינו נוסעים ממקום למקום ואוכלים שם, אף שהיה לנו חילוקי מנהגים בין מקום למקום. It says in different cities in Morocco, Meknes, Fez, Casablanca, Marrakesh, and others, each community had different standards of how to define the meat kosher. But when rabbis were traveling from place to place and staying with others, they would eat the meat. They would never ask, did you follow this rule or that rule? It says the consideration was the majority of animals are kosher. Meaning it's hard to make it non-kosher. Especially now, if he says it about meat, even more so when you go to someone and says, is the rice kosher? Maybe there's a grain of wheat there. Or did you buy the cookies where your friend is kosher? But I don't know how kosher he is. Did he really buy the cookies that has no ground pork in them? Was he that careful? I don't know. Right? He says, "Ma'od ki anu olim hadashim tzrichim lelech achar advarim hatziburiyim hanimtzeim kvar bamakom afilu le'akel." He says, as new immigrants in Israel, meaning the melting pot, everybody comes with new customs. We have to follow whatever is available at a community level, not go crazy. So, one last thing, and that is in the Mishnah says about the holiday of Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, that during the holiday, the rabbis would lift all the restrictions of kashrut that were additional. Meaning, if there was one group who had a certain level of kashrut, and another level who had a lower level, and actually not the lower level. The lower level was the optimal. The other people who wanted to be more considered themselves strict. The rabbi said, on Pesach, we're all friends. We all have to be together. So based on that, the ruling is, not everybody has to follow it, but it is an option. When you're invited to a friend, to relatives, and they tell you that the food is kosher, you could eat there. You ask no questions. If you decide to decline, and you have a good excuse on how to do that without those people being offended, fine. But we have to remember that offending another person is as much of a consideration in the, not only in general halakha, but the level of kashrut of the food. If I prepared food and during the process offended the another person, might not be kosher. On the other hand, if you went to eat by someone and decided, in order not to offend them, to eat the food, and because they told you it's kosher, you did the right thing. So, I hope all of, as they say, Pesach ta'im v'sameach.